This is our third Riordan IVC Symposium, IVC and Cancer Symposium. I'm Dr. Ron Hunninghake, and I'd like to welcome all of you. I'm the Chief Medical Officer here, and we're sorry that Kansas weather didn't quite hold out. Is that okay? For us, we had 78 degrees here a couple days ago, so it's going to be a little chilly for the next couple days. But you're in about the best place in the world to have a symposium on IV vitamin C and cancer. As you know, Dr. Riordan picked up the flag when Linus Pauling and Ewan Cameron passed and did an amazing amount of research, and we have carried on the tradition, and I know many of you are now flag carriers in this effort to make known to the world the benefits of IV vitamin C for cancer patients. I feel that we all have a special bond, and today I'm here under special circumstances. Yesterday evening I got word that my father passed from myeloma. And so I talked to Mom. She lives up in northeast Kansas. And she said, you definitely should stay and do your presentation. So we're going to do a slight change in the order of presentations this morning. I'll be giving my talk, which I was going to give later on this morning. I'll give it first. And it'll be in memory of my father, who was 90 just last month. And so he lived a really good life. He was an inspiration to me. Ironically, I feel like I learned more from him about patient care than I learned in medical school. He ran a gas station, and he put customer care first. And I sometimes think our relationships with our patients are as important of a part of the healing process as the therapies that we give them. So I'm thankful to my father for imparting that powerful knowledge to me, even though he was not a medical doctor, he was a car doctor. And he always taught me how to think what was the underlying cause. You know, it's interesting, if you've known mechanics, they are marvelous diagnosticians. And sometimes I think doctors should think more like mechanics and really ask the question, what's really going on here, instead of putting the tape over the red light like we so often do in medicine. So my job, and our staff here has worked very hard to make your experience comfortable. We've got some unique things that you will not ever experience, I don't think, at any other conference or symposium. The entire campus is your home, you know, for the next couple days, and you're on friendly territory. Everyone here is here to help you have a great experience. If you are at the exhibitors area up in Dome 6, I should probably give you just a little bit of orientation. How many of you have never been here before? Oh, wow, okay. So this campus came to Dr. Riordan in a dream. He had started the Riordan Clinic in 1975 as a laboratory. Dr. Charles Hinshaw was our first laboratory head, and he's back there. Charlie, you want to raise your hand? Say hello to Charlie when you get a chance. He's back. He came out of retirement to help us out a couple years ago and is doing a great job. And so he knows a lot about the history of the Riordan Clinic. It started as a laboratory because Olive W. Garvey, who was a wealthy she was a widow here in town. Her husband had died suddenly, and she took over a huge empire of oil and land and wheat and you name it. Anyway, she wondered why she couldn't get a nutrient test done. She needed to get a nutrient test done at her doctor's office, and her doctor had no idea what to do. He didn't even know you could do that. And so she was looking for someone to help her get her nutrient levels checked. And so fortunately she ran into Dr. Riordan, who as a psychiatrist was an understudy of Carl Pfeiffer. Some of you may know about Carl Pfeiffer, Abram Hoffer. And he said he would be willing to run her lab or to start her lab with her, and so that's how the Riordan Clinic got started downtown. And after so many years of successful care of not only psychiatric patients, but patients who were beginning to have chronic illness, chronic degenerative illness, it was decided that a bigger facility was needed. And I remember going to the second international conference as a first-year family practice intern, and they had a model of this facility outside the hall. And I looked at that and I said, that'll never happen. And that was one of Dr. Riordan's famous sayings. He's got a little booklet here that I wish sometime we need to get it reprinted, but one of his favorite sayings is, while they were saying it couldn't be done, someone did it. So hopefully that's what a lot of people have said about cancer, is that, gee, this is really a tough problem. You know, how many billions and billions of dollars have been thrown at this illness, and yet here we have in our hands a very special and powerful therapy that we need to know more about. We need to explore it more, and there's a lot of research that still needs to be done for the sake of knowing, but also for the sake of communicating with our peers and making this known to the rest of the scientific community, the medical community, and to the community at large. And so today, the purpose of this symposium and the idea of a symposium is to come together and bring experts who have some knowledge of IV vitamin C in their own experience, or who want to know more about vitamin C, and to see what we can discover as co-learners. Frankly, I think that was one of Dr. Riordan's very best creations, was the concept of the co-learner. He has revolutionized he actually saw the writing on the wall that the doctor-patient relationship would be revolutionized by the internet and by the widespread availability of information. And so many of your patients will come to you with stacks of papers that they've already downloaded and read, and they know a lot about their illnesses. And so in humility, we have to become co-learners with them oftentimes. And if it weren't for that, I'm not sure IVC would be used as extensively as it is, because there is a lot of information on IV vitamin C on our website and on other websites, and the patients are seeing the value of it, and they're going to their doctors and asking for it. One of our case presentations this afternoon will be of a Hodgkin's lymphoma patient who has gotten her oncologist to do IV vitamin C and is making great headways with her husband. So before I get a field on that, I want to kind of just give you basic orientation. You all came in, this is a 90-acre campus, and you all came in Dome 1. That's our entry dome. I know you've come from far and wide. We have attendees from Japan, China, South America, Argentina, from England, Italy, Canada. They're practically our brothers and sisters, and so, yeah, first name basis. So welcome all of you, and thank you for making the long trip. So this is our welcome dome. Dome 1 is where our patients come in. We are functioning today in Dome 8. We are seeing patients. We are doing procedures, and so you will be seeing patients when you're walking around. But I want you to feel free to walk around the campus, like that Southwest advertisement. You're free to walk around the cabin, in this case, the campus. And by the way, we are broadcasting in every dome. We have a link up of HD TV in every dome. And if you are out on the grounds and you're close to one of our many wireless connections, we have an open wireless connection here in Dome 8 and Dome 1, and many of the surrounding domes can pick up those connections. So if you want to log in to riordanclinic.org, we're a nonprofit organization devoted to research, education, and innovative clinical care. So you can log in and watch us online, and there are a number of people who are streaming in for this conference. That's Dome 1. That's where the books are. That's where you'll sign up if you're interested in doing any procedures yourself. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. You can sign up in Dome 1. If you haven't signed up for the banquet, you can sign up in Dome 1. So that's the sign-up area. We have our books and our supplements. That's where you register. And where we are right now is really underneath Dome 7. And so it goes clockwise, but Dome 7 does not really technically have a basement. It's actually up here. But here in the panorama room, we're down by Marie's Cafe. I hope you all enjoyed your breakfast. And so we're here in the pan room, but we're being broadcast over the internet, and we're being broadcast in every dome except Dome 3. Now, Dome 3 is our administrative dome, so we don't have a large screen TV there, but we have a conference room in Dome 2 with a very large screen and very comfortable chairs. So if ever you need a break from being in the pan room here, you can go to Dome 2. Dome 4 is our physical medicine dome, and I don't know, is Dr. Ann here? She's not here. She's our chiropractor, and that will be available to you if any of you need an adjustment from your plane flight or whatever. She's in there. Dome 5 is the laboratory. Actually, the laboratory is below Dome 5. We have the upper level, which are the clinical areas, and then the lower levels, we have the laboratory and storage and the library is in the bottom of Dome 2. If you want, we're going to give a tour on Sunday morning for those of you that are still around, or if those of you that won't be able to be here on Sunday morning would like a tour. I would like for you to talk to Tiffany. Tiffany, could you raise your hand? Let's give Tiffany a hand. She was amazing to this was, for those of you who've put conferences together, it's a heck of a deal. And so she has done a wonderful job, and she will be around to help us for any comfort needs or any transportation needs, any information needs. And if you're interested in a tour, she will be helping to organize that during one of the breaks. You might notice in terms of your schedule that there are plenty of breaks. There's a morning break both mornings, half an hour, so that you have a chance to go up and visit our exhibitors. The exhibitors will be in Dome 6. And I've shown the trail. There's a trail that goes out either this door or you can go out the back door. And in front of the pyramid, there's some very nice black locust trees that it's kind of like a little wooded area that you travel up this trail, and then you'll be right at Dome 6. And again, we have a high-definition TV in there, so in case you get into a big discussion with one of the exhibitors and you're a little delayed coming back, we're going to try to start everything on time and finish on time, but if you're a little bit delayed, it's okay. You won't miss anything. You can kind of watch it on the TV, and then when you do come back in through the back door or through the cafe area. Just come in quietly and sit in the back, and that way we won't be disturbed. But you don't have to feel so constricted, like, oh my gosh, I've got to rush here, I've got to rush there. Hopefully you can relax and enjoy this just a little bit more. So we'll have breaks in the morning, and then we'll have our lunch break from basically noon to 1:30, but from 1 to 1:30 will be an exhibit time and time for therapies if you're interested, and time for blood draws, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then basically at about 3:30, each afternoon there'll be a break. Today's break will be a little bit longer, 3:30 to 4:15. We want to give you plenty of time with the exhibitors. And then we have our panel discussions at the end of each day. If there is time at the end of a particular presentation, of course, we have our microphone up here, and we ask that you come up, and you will be videotaped as you ask your question. We are videotaping in high definition, so for those of you that want to get copies, there is a sheet in here where you can sign up to have copies of the presentations if you're interested, and they will be in high def. Okay, at this point, I'm going to have, where's Nicole? Nicole is our head nurse. She's going to come up. We're going to talk to you about a special program. Last symposium, which was about 2 years ago, we're going to be having these about every 2 years. we had a participant, an attendee, ask us if she could do an IV vitamin C while she was here. And we hadn't really thought about that, and so we said, yeah, we'll arrange it. And word got out, and so we ended up doing about 20 attendees wanting IV vitamin Cs. It was a little bit chaotic, and so this year we have tried to make it more organized. And so if you get out this blue paper, Symposium Therapies Offered, we are basically going to offer to any of you at a discount any of the therapies that we normally do. What are some of the things that we do up there, Nicole?
Of course, the high-dose vitamin C. Our newest kind of cutting-edge thing that Dr. Ron introduced us a year ago is our ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy. It's kind of been a whirlwind to us, helping with killing fungus, bacteria, and virus, and also with anti-inflammatory responses. We have a PET machine. It's a pulse electromagnetic therapy machine. A lot of patients ask if it's like a TENS unit. It is, but it's a little different as far as it's using electromagnetic fields. We use that a lot on acute trauma like strains and injuries, and then patients that have arthritis or pain in joints and areas like that. It's been kind of a godsend for a lot of patients that are in that high state of pain constantly. We're doing a B12 injection for energy.
Yeah, by the way, the B12 injection is complimentary. For those of you who figure, you know, you've traveled far and you might be a little bit tired, and we all wanted you to get a chance to go into Dome 8. The Central Dome, I didn't even get to tell you about it, but this is where the clinical area is. And so for those of you who would like to have a B12 injection, I think what we've done is we've put a color code on the back of your name tag, and I think the reds, if you want to come up during the first break.
Blues are first.
Blues are first.
Blues, then greens, then reds. It all goes in alphabetical order. So Bs are blue first, greens second group, and then reds.
And then the greens will come between after lunch. Actually, you can come during lunch because you're going to have personnel during the lunchtime there.
Yep, for that longest break from
if
noon to 1:30.
If you get done with your lunch and you want to have one of these therapies, you can go up. But the B12, it's a 5,000 international unit hydroxy B12 injection, 1 cc. So for those of you that need literally a shot in the, not the arm, come on up. And so, and then who's the last ones? Let's see, blue, green, and
red.
And the reds, they are going to be at the afternoon break. And if you don't make it today, Nicole's going to be there. You guys are going to be there today from 10 till 4.
Today's from 9 to 4, and tomorrow's 10 to 2.
Okay, 9 to 4 today, 10 to 2 tomorrow. So if you don't make it today, you can always just come in and do that. We do have just a brief little physical. If you're going to do, you don't have to fill this out if you're just going to do the B12 injection, but if you're going to do any other therapy, we'd kind of like for you to fill out just a brief history so that we have that on record. And we'll have consent forms for you to sign up there that you can read when you go up and do that. Now, if you're interested in this, we want you to sign up in Dome 1. Dome 1 is kind of where all the scheduling takes place, and that way they'll have electronically, they'll know who's coming, and it'll be a nice orderly process. You'll be able to watch the videos if you decide to do it during a presentation. We have the big screen playing next to the IV area in Dome 8. So this is our Care for the Caregivers program. You know, as caregivers, there's some research that the caregivers sometimes suffer more than the patient. How many of you feel like that some days? So this is a chance not only to feed your mind, but to feed your body. We have some wonderful meals lined up for you, so hopefully you'll go away nourished in body, mind, and spirit as a result of the symposium. Any other thoughts? Anyone have any questions for Nicole? So the nursing staff here is excellent. I think I can say that.
Oh, yes. I was
biased.
Pretty good. I will say that just if you have a time, just glance over the list of everything. It kind of goes in detail what we do it for, how we use it. And there's also IV glutathione and alpha-lipoic acid that we're offering as well. We're putting it at a max of 2 days, or 2 IVs a day, so you don't get it over. Yeah. Unless you want to.
Yeah, one procedure a day is a lot for some people, so because you can detox.
I have a question. Is the price on here with the 20% or the
This is the retail price, so the price will be deducted from what you see here. So there will be an additional 20% off. On the history and physical part, if you do decide to do therapies, when you come up to do your therapy after you've scheduled, if you could mark what you're interested in doing, so that way we can go over it with you. When you come up, we do have another sheet that's kind of an order form. We can talk to you about what dose you want in your vitamin C infusion, just a little more in depth of what's included in the IV, so that we give you options, kind of like a restaurant menu to go over with you guys. So,
okay, very good.
Well, pick me up.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
We have another program for you, kind of a corollary of care for the caregivers, and it's an offshoot of the fact that we started as a laboratory measuring nutrient levels, and we call these nutrient levels health markers. And I think one of Dr. Riordan's great kind of pointers that he gave to all of us is that it's always best to focus on what you want. And it's interesting that our whole sickness care system focuses on what people don't want. We don't want to be sick, but we focus on sickness. Now, you need that. I'm not trying to decry the system in that regard, but I think it's a kind of a brilliant stroke to say, hey, let's go someplace where they really focus on what people want. They want to be healthy. They want to be vibrant. They want to have longevity and quality of life. And so for that reason, sometimes measuring that which is going to give you what you desire is a good thing, because what you measure, what you focus on, is what you bring into your life. And so this is our health markers program. And again, as a Riordan Symposium attendee, we're going to give to you complimentary the vitamin A, E, and C levels. And so you will have scheduling for that at the registration. Okay, so you've been scheduled for that. And so if you pull out the purple colored with the clinic domes, and I'll have Dr. Ryan Muller is going to come up. Ryan, you want to come up and we'll talk a little bit about this. So if you go to the last page, you'll see that the complimentary panel is what each of you are receiving, and we'll send that out in the mail. Those of you that have been here before received your results, and we had some really outstanding vitamin C levels, by the way, last time. Well, you would hope, you would think. It's interesting that sometimes, what is it, the cobbler's kids goes without shoes. The doctors themselves don't actually do what they have available to them. And so I always encourage my staff to do what Dr. Riordan encouraged me. He said, Ron, don't prescribe something you haven't done yourself. So I try to do on a regular basis the types of things that we have here. So one of the things that we offer is to measure the health markers. And so Ryan, so they have the complement. Dr. Ryan Muller is a chiropractor. He's helping us with our marketing. They do the antioxidant health. What else can they do?
Well, we have a list of several options that range anywhere from measuring the nutrients that are associated with brain health, with skin, hair, and nail health. If you'll look at that last page in your packet, you have a copy of that?
Yeah, the very last page kind of tells you some of the different panels that are available.
You can see on there where we have the antioxidant panel for you. The listed panels below that are different options if you want to check things all the way down to what we call our mega panel, which literally checks everything from A to Z, nutrient and micronutrient wise. Can I share a little something about your test?
Okay.
Dr. Ron here actually had one of the highest scores out of everyone here at the clinic. So you can tell that, you look how good he looks today.
That's in spite of all the stress of getting ready for this.
So being able to measure your micronutrients is extremely important, because you look at your gas gauge on your car and you don't know when to fill up unless you see that. So again, you look at your micronutrient levels. Every single one of those is extremely important for your body to be at its optimal health level. And if you don't know what you're deficient in, you don't know what disease is kind of working its way into your life that can inhibit you from being as productive. And I can tell you, this room right here, this room is a very important collection of people that are going to go forth in this world and make a huge difference for other people's health. So it's important for us to take care of ourselves.
Thank you. Ryan will be in Dome 5 when you're getting your blood drawn and available to talk to him. We're working on a corporate wellness model based upon health markers, and we've already worked with a company up in Salina, Kansas, And we've gotten the first 6-month repeats, and just about all of their levels went up as a result of focusing on measuring nutrient levels. Of course, they are on nutrient packets, but it's really neat to see and to talk to the head of the company how it's changed the whole conversation in the company to where they're talking about what are you eating, what are you taking, how are you feeling, how's that working for you. So you can literally change the dynamic of a patient's life or a corporation's life by starting to focus on health markers. So
Can I say
one last thing.
There's another page inside that health marker packet for you guys to have a kind of a description of what each of these panels is utilized for here in our clinic. So you can read through there. It's a brief little description. Example, the energy panel uncovers the biochemical deficiency associated with chronic fatigue caused by sustained medication use or nutrient deficiency or adrenal fatigue. So you can read through those little paragraphs there and get a good idea and maybe match that up to what you're looking for.
Okay, Ryan.
Thank you, Dr.
very
Ron.
much. Appreciate it. Okay, I think we're about ready to start with the program, but before we do, I just want to make a couple introductions. We have our CEO, Brian Riordan, is here in the front. Brian will be saying hi. Yeah, hello.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
And brother Neil Riordan. Neil is here, and Neil has graciously offered to kind of take my spot since I'm going to be leaving after my presentation, and he and Brian, and then the third person, Dr. Stephen Carter. Stephen Carter is not a doctor, but he's the executive director of the International Society of Orthomolecular Medicine, and they have sponsored, what is it, 25? Or how many of you actually helped put on these conferences? No, up in 42. So we got a pro here in the crowd, and so Stephen's going to help us out as well. One other introduction, Dr. Yanagasawa. Atsu Yanagasawa is the president of the International Society for Orthomolecular Medicine, and he has over 400 doctors in his organization doing IV vitamin C for cancer patients. And his goal as president, I'm going to speak for you, Atsu, is to create a worldwide network of clinics and organizations that offer IV vitamin C so that when patients are traveling and they're receiving IV vitamin C, they'll be able to go online and find out where they can go to and get IV vitamin C on their trips, or if they're just starting IV vitamin C. I know another guest here is Dr. Tom Levy, who will be one of our speakers. Tom and I have talked about how so many people are desperately looking around for clinics to get IV vitamin C, and I would think at the very least this would be a good seed group here in the United States to make sure we have a database online that tells people where they can go to get IV vitamin C and have a kind of a common basis of safety as well. So those are some exciting things that are happening. So let's go ahead and jump into this. If I can find it, there we go. IV vitamin C inflammation and the Bi-oxidant Paradox. So I feel very grateful to be here. I've been here 23 years. I had my scuffles with Dr. Riordan. How many of you have strong mentors in your past? And while they were alive or while you were with them, you fought with them more almost than you worked with them. And when they're gone, all of a sudden you realize you learned a heck of a lot from them as a result of that. And so I find myself quoting Dr. Riordan 5 times a day now and realize that as he was a creative genius. Just look around. I mean, this was built in 1985. You know, it wasn't quite so friendly back then. Not that it's friendly now, but it wasn't quite so friendly back then to the notion of nutrient therapy. And yet he was a pioneer. He was a mountain man. He made it happen. He had a vision of where he wanted to go. And you're sitting in that vision right now. So visions and dreams are very powerful. As I mentioned, this was a dream, literally, that he had one night. He wanted to create a facility that represented the most modern thinking in nutrition. And so his hero was Buckminster Fuller, and so he thought the geodesic dome would be a good representation of strength and innovation. And yet he also wanted to bring he was mindful of the fact that nutrition is the most ancient therapy and probably still the best that's been totally overlooked, not totally, but mostly overlooked in modern times. But there's a renaissance of nutrition occurring. For him, the pyramid represented that aspiration, that pinnacle of going for the top, the best. And so he was a tough guy to work for because he was a perfectionist. He demanded a lot. He was a workaholic. It actually killed him. He died here, giving his life to what this institution represents. So I'm dedicating my presentation today, of course, to Dr. Riordan, but also to my father, because my father represents another aspect of what Dr. Riordan stood for, which is valuing that relationship with the patient above so much else. He made the point over and over again, we need to take good care of our patients. That's a crucial part of the healing process. That's what gives them hope. That's what sparks them to move on and to continue the fight, the journey, the process, whatever it is you want to call what people go through when they're dealing with cancer. Because it's so different for each person, it's hard to name it. Some people it really is a huge battle, it's a war. Other people it's a rethinking of who they are and what their life means. It's an opportunity to re-examine what's really valuable to them, what they're willing to focus their life on, and whether or not they're willing to make some serious changes. And oftentimes, I've told many a cancer patient, I said, if you play your cards right, you will be healthier than you've ever been. If you really use this opportunity, this illness is an opportunity. You have to shift your thinking about it. Of course it's dangerous. Of course you could lose your life from it. But you may regain more than you lose if you keep the right attitude. Wouldn't be right if we didn't mention Dr. Linus Pauling. Dr. Pauling was one of Dr. Riordan's many orthomolecular heroes, using the right dose at the right time for the right condition. All that's so very important, and we got that from Linus. And so Stephen Carter likes to say this is the orthomolecular capital of the world. I like to agree, Stephen. Thank you very much for whenever you mention that. And we're doing our best to carry on that tradition of helping people understand how important it is to use molecules that help the body heal itself. Many of my patients, I say, you know, I really don't do that much. I just try to make sure that we're going to fill in the gaps of what you need. By the way, do all of you know what the most important nutrient is? Yeah, she does. This is one of my favorite questions to ask audiences, and they'll say, oh, you know, vitamin C, vitamin D, you know, what? Love is a great nutrient. Yeah, I'm for it. But from the bionutritional perspective, the most important nutrient is the one you're lowest in, because we learned from Dr. Roger Williams that we're all different. And so Dr. Riordan mentioned over and over again, measure, 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 because if we could find where people are low and give them those nutrients, that's what's going to make their whole team work better. And so that's why measurement is such an important factor here. So I'm going to give my talk. It's kind of an ungainly talk anyway, but I'm going to try to give it some structure by giving you what I call my 12 insights. And I don't know how tremendous these are, but they kind of can help me get through this presentation and hopefully give you a kind of skeleton structure that you can hang the ideas that we would like to explore during our time together around this concept, is cancer a non-healing wound? And I'm so grateful that Neil is here, because one of the sad things that happened, sad and glad at the same time, yesterday was a really tumultuous day, but Dr. Frank Schallenberger, who was one of our speakers, canceled for the second time. So I'm not going to be inviting Frank again. It gives us the opportunity for Neil to this afternoon talk about this core concept. Neil, if you don't know, Neil and Xiaolong Ming, who's one of our former researchers here, wrote this core article on the idea that cancer acts almost like a non-healing wound, or is it a functional repair tissue, that whole notion. And so we'll be talking about that this afternoon. Dr. Michael Gonzalez and Dr. Jorge Miranda will be helping out as well. They have just recently published a paper on the metabolic aspects of carcinogenesis. And so, right now I'm going to kind of give you my thoughts on this. So what are the 5 phases of any wound healing? Of course, we hope to stay in a process of health, and inevitably injury does occur. This is a pretty tough world. There's a lot of toxicity, there's a lot of danger, there's a lot of stress. And when that injury occurs, the body as a whole responds through a signaling process that begins repair, and hopefully the healing occurs. So these are the 5 steps: health to injury, injury to signal, signal to repair, repair to healing, and healing back to health. On the cellular level, what's actually happening? Health is a redox balance state, slightly reduced. There's a slight edge towards reduction. And that's why we oftentimes think of the importance of vitamin C and other antioxidants as helping us maintain that slight edge towards reduction, the redox balance. And then when you injure yourself, whether you hit your finger with a hammer accidentally or you imbibe a toxin, either purposefully or accidentally, there is some disruption in that cellular balance. And it shifts from a reduced state to an oxidation, to a free radical or oxidative state. And that then serves as a signal, which starts a process which we call inflammation. And I've written a little book on inflammation, and I try to point out to people, inflammation shouldn't be looked upon as a bad thing. It's our friend. We probably as a species wouldn't be alive if we didn't have such a powerful inflammatory system. Unfortunately, there are factors which are causing it to trigger almost out of proportion, and it's causing damage, more damage, kind of like friendly fire. It's a warrior, but the warriors kind of get confused or over exuberant with their weapons. But if inflammation does its job, it will lead to a restoration of the healthy process, the healing process. So my core notion, if you probably don't get anything else from the presentation, you should go away with this, that most cancers can be traced back to a sustained cellular injury. And I use the word sustained very purposefully because, again, that was Dr. Riordan's key insight, is that he didn't like the term chronic illness. He said if you tell a patient you've got a chronic illness, you're implying that you've got it, you're stuck with it. You're going to have it the rest of your life. There's nothing can be done. We'll treat it symptomatically, and that's a lot of what medicine does. It's all palliative. He liked the term sustained because sustained means that there's something there keeping it going. And if we could discover what that is, we could unsustain it. We could get rid of it. We could detoxify it. We could remove the irritant. We could do something, heal the infection, help the immune system to get this condition back to a healthy state. So anyway, this sustained cellular energy is due to cumulative physical, chemical, biological, and or emotional damage. So this is one of the key insights, is that the fact that whatever is causing cancer is there and it's not going away, apparently, because for many people it's very difficult to heal the cancers. There's this kind of notion that cancer is a death sentence, that once you got that diagnosis, your time is up or you've got a limited time. But I think this understanding kind of gives some hope to people that, wait a minute, if we can get to the root of what's triggering this disease process, this aberration of the healing technique or the healing capability of the body, then, hey, we can do something good for you. So here are some of the categories of sustained injury: chronic physical damage such as radiation, electromagnetic fields, chronic trauma, irritants, mesotheliomas are, asbestos is an irritant, smoking is an irritant, obviously. Chronic chemical damage, all the carcinogens in our environment, toxic chemicals, heavy metals, pesticides, and of course, the other side of that is the nutritional factors that fuel the liver's detoxification system being depleted by virtue of people being under chronic stress. And so The chronic biological damage. This conference will address that. Chronic infections. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Marco Ruggiero here to talk about what can be done to enhance the immune system. And so chronic viruses, bacteria, fungal. Dr. Riordan was very interested in the cell wall deficient organism theory of cancer causation, and or parasites. That's been discussed as well. An overactive or an underactive inflammatory response. The depletion of growth and repair molecules. Neil will probably be talking about that. You know, your stem cells literally run out of gas, and you lose the ability to repair the chronic sustained injury because you just run out of repair molecules. And then finally, Dr. Michael Bauerschmidt will be talking about what I call the mind-body damage that can occur in people's lives. And most people, if you're talking to your cancer patients about what's going on in their lives, not always, but more often than not, it seems to me there's been some kind of a major loss or change in an important relationship. And that stress that leads to depression or a loss of meaning and purpose, that loss of human connectedness, isolation, that can be a very powerful environment in which, for some reason, the cancer cells seem to do better. So what is the impact of sustained cellular injury on wound healing? Well, we've reversed redox. We've lost the redox balance. Now we have this persisting disruption. And over time, the oxidation, which is supposed to be a signal, becomes a kind of yelling fire in a crowded theater kind of thing, but you're just doing it all the time. And so the body's, in a sense, in a hypervigilant state, reacting to this persistent disruption. And as a result, we have uncontrolled inflammation. And a big part of my talk is how the inflammatory system definitely plays into this. And there's more and more research emerging that cancer thrives in a microenvironment of chronic inflammation. And so the net result is we have cellular dysregulation. All the regulatory systems that normally are part of the healing process become dysregulated in a chronic way. So we have this sustained injury. Sustained cellular injury creates a zone of intense free radical damage and excessive oxidative stress. So this audience is certainly very familiar with oxidative stress, that oxidants, of course, cause damage. Dr. Levy gave a wonderful presentation at our first symposium about how you can basically reduce all poisons down to oxidants and the damage that they cause. Oxidants steal electrons and they create free radicals, of course. And redox is, as you know, it's just that give and take of electrons, that balancing between the two. And this is a little slide I put into the audience, the general public audience, when we're talking about cancer, that if you take a sliced apple and leave it out, the oxygen will oxidize and brown the apple. And if you put a little lemon juice on it, you can keep it fresher longer. Lemon juice is the antioxidant. Steve Hickey, if you get a chance to read his book, Cancer, Nutrition, and Survival, fantastic book. He says the cellular redox environment, if you want to say what is it about that? Simple rule of thumb is that the environment of healthy cells, again, our focus is on what makes a cell healthy. It's a reducing rather than oxidizing environment. Although we depend upon oxidation for metabolism, immune defense, and cell signaling purposes, we must also avoid the damage that it can cause. This slide, to me, is a very important slide in the thesis that I'm kind of developing in this presentation. So if anyone is questioning whether or not antioxidants are important, well, the American Cancer Society, which for years and years and years said that food doesn't matter, now has giant posters of all these colorful fruits and vegetables as kind of their media message. And so it's being accepted now that maybe antioxidants are important. But if you've got cancer, don't take them, by the way. So that's mixed message. Thank you. Very confusing for patients. And so I spend a lot of time trying to explain this, that how can you use something that's good to prevent cancer, and yet when you've got cancer, you should stop using it. One doctor said that, you know, if you follow that message, you need to get rid of just about every food you normally eat except for tea and toast. He says, oh, wait a minute, tea has antioxidants in it, so toast. So there's not much left when you start trying to really follow the message of avoiding antioxidants. So number 3 insight, oxidative stress signaling. Oxidative stress signals the release of special molecules called cytokines. And so I talked to audiences about, you know, this is how the body coordinates the healing process. These are the messenger molecules. So if you have free radicals roaming in your finger that you've injured, or in your toxic liver, or wherever the injury has occurred, that's the oxidative stress, and that's signaling the cells to send a message to bring in the troops. Well, your cytokines are that message, and that's what coordinates the chronic inflammatory response, which, if you cannot properly heal, you're going to be creating the non-healing wound. You're going to work around me, okay. So sustained cellular injury leads to this unrelenting cytokine signaling. So we have the redox reversal and the persistent damage, but we have this unrelenting oxidation. That's another part of the cancer environment that's keeping the cancer going. And what are we going to do to treat it? We're going to give more oxidation when we give chemotherapy and radiation. So you talk about unrelenting oxidation, that's how we're approaching it. And of course, the uncontrolled inflammation in many cases becomes more uncontrolled. Sometimes it can become controlled. So I'm not totally against radiation and chemotherapy, and it's just, maybe it's important for you to know that, and I'll get to this in my presentation, we're not opposed to conventional medicine. Modulate the inflammation. Oh, yes, there is. Vitamin C might be helpful. So, several years back, I think it was Neil that that create a kind of fingerprint of what's happening in the cellular inflammatory environment that's promoting all of the healing processes that's going on during cancer. So we can actually take a kind of biopsy of this inflammatory response. And here's what we found. We found that there were a number of signals, especially in a cancer situation, there were more signals of heal the wound. That's all these things that are up here, angiogenesis, inflammation, oncogene activation, apoptosis. A lot of these are just inflammatory signals to try to heal the wound. The body's doing its best to go after this injury and heal it. And then it kind of turns down turn off the healing signals, because what we know about cytokines and what we know about the inflammatory system is that it's a balance. It's a sentinel. It's a tripwire. And what happens is, if you've got the injury, if you've got the thorn sticking in your hand and it hurts and it's red and it's inflamed and pussy, just putting antibiotic ointment on it or taking pain medicine isn't the answer. You need to try to take the thorn out. Otherwise, it continues to trip the inflammatory response, and the body sets up this sequence of messages based upon the chronic oxidative signal to try to heal the wound. That's what the body's trying to do, and that's why this model of the non-healing wound is such a compelling model. And it really, to me, it kind of changes the whole symbology of cancer. A lot of people think of cancer as some kind of evil thing that has entered their body from the outside. Could it be nothing other than the body's attempt to heal itself from some noxious wound that, more often than not, the smokers, for instance, they're inducing their wound every day. You know, there's a lot of things that we don't realize we're doing that we are inducing. Could we hold the questions till then? Yeah. I'll lose my pace. So what happens then, as a result of these cytokine signals, and the wound not healing is the cytokine signals become more and more progressive. If nutrient reserves are inadequate or depleted and the damage cannot be repaired, if the healing factors are missing, if your hormones are out of balance, if your stem cells are depleted, the cytokine signaling just keeps intensifying and the inflammatory response just keeps growing in the body's desperate attempt to address the mounting oxidative stress. So what is cellular health? Now I'm going to kind of jump a little bit here into one of my other heroes, Dr. Roger Williams, who was one of our speakers at one of the functional medicine conferences. What is cellular health? It's the nutritional microenvironment of our body's cells that is so crucially important to our health, and that deficiencies in this environment constitute a major cause of disease. If you want to know where I'm kind of going with this talk, it's that cancer is a microenvironment that's got too much inflammation and not enough healing nutrients, in real simple terms. And this kind of comes out of Dr. Roger Williams' work, where he said, you know, the body as a complex multicellular entity has to have a lot of coordinated activities. And in cancer, because the wound isn't healing, there's a discoordination that starts to occur as a result of running out of these regulatory nutrients. And that's why it's not just IV vitamin C. It's not just the one nutrient. I think with cancer patients, you have to look at them as a holistic, as a whole life illness, and they have to start thinking about their lifestyle, their diet, their sleep, their relationships, their nutrition. So to me, if you're going to be successful in dealing with complex cancer patients, you have to take all of this into consideration. So this was out of Dr. Williams' book, Nutrition Against Disease, Environmental Prevention, and he's talking about the microcellular environment. So it's an individualized, optimal nutritional environment that resists the uncontrolled multiplication of damaged cells, which he called dedifferentiation. And there are control mechanisms that maintain this cellular differentiation, and these control mechanisms need the maintenance and repair nutrients. So it's not all of a sudden that we have to forget about all the other nutrients. We have to think about all of this in terms of helping patients maintain their strength and their health. And this is one of the challenges of dealing with a cancer patient. And the later you get them in their illness, you know, stage 4 cancer patients are not eating well. Their life's out of control. They're financially having problems. Their families are all disrupted. It's tough. It's better if you can catch patients early in the process and begin that whole life change. But sometimes anything is better than nothing. I'm going to throw in a little curveball here. I was at a conference in San Francisco. I don't know how many of you have heard of aneuploidy. Normal human cells have 23 different chromosomes that come in pairs. That yields 46 chromosomes. And the cells that have 46 are diploid. But cells found in solid tumors, on the other hand, typically have between 60 to 90 chromosomes or more. And so their ploidy is not good, and that's the Greek translation for that is aneuploidy. And there's now discussion about how all cancer cells appear to be aneuploidic. Dr. Vogelstein of Johns Hopkins has thought that at least 90% are aneuploidy, and there are people who say that maybe if you look hard enough, you'll find it in 100%. So the questions that kind of arise out of this new insight into cancer is, are these aneuploidic cells arising all the time in all tissues? I mean, many of you have said, I've told patients, yeah, we all have cancer, but our immune surveillance system, our defenses are helping us control that cancer, or what we now know about certain breast cancers and certain prostate cancers, that men as they age are going to develop these slow-growing cancers, and sometimes it's better just not to do anything, that they'll probably end up dying of something else rather than being overly aggressive. So do aneuploidic cells typically die due to their own abnormal cellular controls? In other words, if they've got 60 to 90 chromosomes, their control systems are pretty screwy, and they probably don't even survive the vast majority of the time. But here's the key question. Are there species of these aneuploidic cells that arise in these areas of the non-healing wound? Is this what's happening, that this inflammatory environment, this microenvironment that's deficient in nutrients, is this a match for this weird species of aneuploidic cell to just suddenly find a home where it can grow? And is that environment promoting the growth of those particular cells? So does a chronic wound create a microenvironment suitable to aneuploidic cells? So I don't know if I have an answer to that question, but it's an interesting thing to think about, that maybe what we've done in the field of oncology is give way too much attention to the cancer cell and not enough attention to the environment in which cancer cells grow. And I think one of the interesting things about IV vitamin C and the nutritional approach to cancer is that we're now starting to shift some of the awareness to that microenvironment and what we can do to modify it in such a way that it promotes the growth of healthy cells, so that maybe the cancer cells will either apoptose, kill themselves like they should, or that they will redifferentiate back to more naturally healing cells. And I think this is what Neil will talk about, and Michael and Jorge this afternoon, is a little bit about this metabolic theory of how we can promote a healthier environment and perhaps encourage cells to get well again. And we do have those patients, these patients that go into remission. Sometimes the patients say, what should I tell my oncologist when I come here to get your IVC? And I say, well, tell your oncologist that that doctor out there is trying to induce a remission, a spontaneous remission. Because that's what a lot of times that's what the oncologist will tell them if they get well. Well, you must have just had a spontaneous remission. Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to induce spontaneous remissions. So DNA damage occurs. Number 5th insight. Although healthy cells depend upon oxidation for normal metabolism and immune defense, the sustained oxidative stress will actually damage the DNA in the cell's nucleus and in the mitochondria of the cell. So this is an important point, that if they are under sustained oxidative stress, that stress is doing damage. And the researchers talk about mutations, and maybe they are mutations, but it may just be plain old damage to the DNA. So we know that there's good oxidation and bad oxidation. We need the oxidation that our white cells provides us with the hydrogen peroxide in the lysosomes. We need the oxidation of our mitochondria to burn glucose in order to have energy. And of course, we're talking about excessive oxidative stress. Well, that's the bad oxidation, the free radicals that are damaging the cell membranes in the mitochondria and the DNA, and the various degenerative diseases, which are the results of sustained oxidative damage over time. So most of the time we think of oxidation just coming from the outside, the excessive sunlight or the trans fats or the AGEs from people that have elevated blood sugars, heavy metals. But we need to think about the internal oxidation that may be coming from the mitochondria themselves. This is my representation of how, in a healthy cell, the reducing intracellular milieu is what keeps us going, which we generate energy, we make our own antioxidant enzymes. There's a lot of factors that we need to maintain this healthy intracellular milieu, but it can shift. It can shift to where you have excessive oxidation intracellularly. And that's not just coming from the outside. It may be an internal process. And that's what I'm going to bring up right now, is that there are factors going on with the mitochondria that are generating oxidative stress within the cell, in addition to poor foods and malnutrition and metals and trans fats and all that, unhealthy lifestyle. So paradoxically, sustained oxidative stress may originate from both the intracellular and the extracellular environment. So the question we get here when people call up and they're interested in coming here for IV vitamin C, they'll say, well, how many cases of X cancer have you treated with IV vitamin C? And so we'll always give them an estimate, but I kind of try to tell people, your cancer is probably different. Even if you have the same name, everyone's cancer is a little bit different because of a number of reasons. I always like to, by the way, this is Dr. Riordan's arm. He always liked to tell people that he had ordered 78,000 IVs in his lifetime, just to kind of give them the notion that maybe these are safe. And the people that say, well, are you going to get a kidney stone from getting an IV vitamin C? And my response is, if that were true, we would be the kidney stone capital of the world for all the IVCs that we've given. But Dr. Riordan's answer is that, no, we don't treat cancer here. We treat the patients who have cancer. So what does he mean by that? We care for the patient. We search for and correct underlying causes. We try to strengthen the healthy cells. We try to lessen oxidative stress. And we're more concerned about quality of life than we are quality of survival. Now, I do think we need data from the conventional perspective. That is an area that is very much needed. And I would like at some time to try to organize some kind of a internet site where we could all put in data so that we could collect in a more rational scientific way large amounts of data that would have a little more relevance to the conventional community. But this is what our patients are faced with. You know, when they come to us with cancer, it's not just the cancer. We know that their age has a factor. That's what really took my dad. He was 90. He really didn't die of the cancer. He had myeloma for 3 years, and we were giving him IV vitamin C for about 6 months, and he was doing really well. But then he was on lenalidomide, and he was on high-dose dexamethasone once a week. He got very confused. His quality of life was going down. We made this decision about a month ago to stop the IV vitamin Cs because we were asking ourselves, what are we doing? Why are we trying to keep him alive for what? He didn't recognize us. He was not very happy. So we had to make a decision to stop the IV vitamin C. So his passing was in part a decision on the part of my brothers and my mother that, okay, he's lived a good life. We have to say enough's enough at this point. But the age of the patient, the family history, nutritional status, smoking history, carcinogen exposure, level of exercise and fitness, sleep quality, radiation, comorbidities. There's, cancer patients have all kinds of comorbidities. Financial stresses, family system disruption, beliefs issues, fear and depression, stage of cancer at diagnosis, stage of cancer at presentation, tumor burden, pain level of chemotherapy. All of these factors influence the individual cancer patient that you're going to see. So when people say, how many cases of X cancer have you seen? I try to say, well, we've seen a lot of those X cancer patients, but they're all a little bit different, and they've got different factors affecting them. And for the most part, this is what contributes to the extracellular oxidative stress. And there is really good evidence that antioxidants do help. Contrary to the prevailing opinion of allopathic oncology, high-dose antioxidant therapies do benefit rather than harm cancer patients. And this has been borne out in a number of clinical trials. Charles Simone has done that. He was one of our speakers, and he has pointed out that there are many studies. There's 145 cellular studies, 135 animal studies, 50 human studies, 8,500 patients that took antioxidants during their cancer, and 4,700 of the 5,000 showed increased survival. So antioxidants definitely do help cancer patients, but there's this mistaken notion that somehow they're going to interfere with the pro-oxidative effects of conventional therapy, but I have an answer to that. So these are some of the published benefits of antioxidants for which you're all aware of, and this is, I think, to a large degree what IV vitamin C does. It helps control inflammation and reduces free radical production. It helps ease pain and improve appetite and quality of life and extend the life expectancy. And this is where we can tell people that it is a wonderful, fantastic biological modifier that nature built in to humans, to all organisms. All organisms have the ability to make their own vitamin C. We still have the gene for it. Unfortunately, it's mutated and it doesn't work anymore. But we do respond to high dose of vitamin C in a similar way that a goat, when it's injured or sick, it will greatly increase its production of vitamin C. Thanks to the GLOW enzyme, gluconolactone oxidase, it can convert glucose into vitamin C quite readily. And I still am looking for the data on the incidence of cancer in goats. There's a lot of published benefits, and I won't go through these. And all of you know the basic idea of vitamin C, that it's nature's predominant antioxidant. But I'm going to make a distinction here that there's a certain amount of intracellular oxidative stress that is, I think, overlooked, that I think IV vitamin C does address. And this is what I want to use this part of the presentation to go over. That damaging free radicals are constantly being generated within mitochondrial membranes. That's just part of life. It's a hothouse. The membrane is a furnace. And so the body had to develop ways to modulate or control the fire. I did a little book on energy, and I compared the mitochondria to little campfires. And so the cells had to figure out how to put stones around the campfire so it didn't light the whole camp on fire. And so there are intracellular antioxidant enzymes being generated all the time that act as a controller of this mitochondrial oxidation. Superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione peroxidase. And what I had hoped for Frank Schellenberger to share with us, and Frank does a marvelous job when he shows up to, I'm going to give him a hard time, you can bet on that. He does a marvelous job of showing that we have neglected the pro-oxidant benefits of hydrogen peroxide and ozone. And that, of course, most of you know that high-dose vitamin C generates hydrogen peroxide. So there is a pro-oxidant benefit of high-dose vitamin C. And maybe it's one of the ways that it's helping people get over cancer. Yes, we get an antioxidant benefit, but maybe the pro-oxidant effect of vitamin C is not so much that the peroxide is acting like a natural chemotherapeutic agent. Maybe it is. There's conflicting evidence on that about how well the peroxide can penetrate into a large tumor. But metabolically, when you give the patient vitamin C and you increase the peroxide in the extracellular environment of the cell, maybe that does have an impact on what's going on inside the cell. Maybe the NAD-NADH ratio, which is so crucial in terms of being able to generate ATP, you have to oxidize NAD in order to get this ATP. Maybe that's an important part of how IV vitamin C helps restore mitochondrial functioning. I have to really thank Dr. Glenn Highland, who's here today. When he was consulting here several years back, we were talking about IV vitamin C helping to resuscitate mitochondria. And I really hadn't thought about that until I started hearing Frank talk about how he measures all of his patients for their oxygen utilization. He puts them on a bike and he puts a little mask on them and measures carbon dioxide generation, and he puts it into a computer, and he can tell you whether you are a good oxygen utilizer or a poor oxygen utilizer. And he can say that in his experience, the poor oxygen utilizers are the ones that tend to come in with the cancers. The good oxygen utilizers tend to stay healthy. That's having an impact on this intracellular environment, this milieu that may be setting people up for problems. So how about this notion, oxygen-induced antioxidants? Oxygen is obviously a pro-oxidant, but we can't live without it. It's the most important nutrient. And as Dr. Jackson, who's one of our former lab directors, used to say with nutrients, it's not what you take, it's what you utilize. It's what you utilize. So what's the difference between a 20-year-old and a 70-year-old, which age, of course, is probably the #1 cancer risk factor, is that a 70-year-old has poorer oxygen utilization. That's a major factor in getting old. So oxidative stress is not only caused by a deficiency of antioxidant nutrients, certainly it could be, but you can cover up, and you can take if you've got a headache, you can take an aspirin and that relieves your headache. You can take antioxidants and that will relieve your oxidative stress. But are we really getting to the heart of the matter? Do we have a dysfunctional engine? Are we putting tape over the red light, in a way, metaphorically, when we should be giving more attention to helping resuscitate mitochondria and thereby reducing intracellular free radical injury? This is what Levine and Kidd in their book on antioxidants talked about functional hypoxia. And so I've got a little diagram here that kind of depicts this, that here we have mitochondrial oxidative stress, and from the realm of seeing that you need oxidants in order to, oxygen to oxidize the NADH to NAD, you need to have that in order to generate ATP. And without ATP, you're going to have a reduced production of those important antioxidant enzymes, and the mitochondrial injury that's going to occur, there's no way to fix them. So now this is the vicious cycle, and the result is less and less utilization of oxygen. The cell shifts anaerobic, and you have decreased carbon dioxide output. When the cell's not putting out carbon dioxide, there's no oxygen exchange, so the oxygen depletion becomes worse and worse, and we start getting dysfunction of certain cellular mechanisms such as the p53 gene, which is necessary for apoptosis. And so this IV redox cycling, which I'm going to just go into in just a moment, is so important, and we can't emphasize how that is an important part of IVC therapy for cancer. So it's faulty oxygen transport. Hemoglobin is the component in blood that serves as the primary transporter of oxygen from the lungs to the cells. But if you get the cells into an anaerobic state, anaerobic metabolism, then they're not producing sufficient amounts of carbon dioxide, so you can't displace the oxygen from the hemoglobin molecule. And so you end up with pockets of anaerobic microenvironment, cellular hypoxemia. And the cells begin to shift to this glycolytic metabolism, where they're only deriving about 2 ATPs from every molecule of glucose, and you start seeing the patients begin to waste away. The anaerobic cells become energy deficient. They lack the energy for the complex control mechanisms that are necessary to control multicellular organs, such as what Roger Williams was talking about. So, and then they also start producing a lot more lactic acid, which can then be converted by the liver back to sugar, which feeds the cancer even more, and the patient just is literally wasting away. And that's what Otto Warburg showed, and I think Dr. Sullivan's going to be talking a little bit about this in his presentation after the break. He showed that cancer cells are anaerobic, or at least parts of them are. There's some interesting new theories about that the stromal cells surrounding the cancer cells are anaerobic, and they're feeding pyruvate to the cancer cells to kind of keep them going, but I won't get into that. So wasting is the sign of anaerobic metabolism. You deplete your nutrient reserves, you develop cachexia. These are our stage 4 patients that we're trying to help, and they're really tough. Warburg did these experiments where he could take non-cancerous cells and deprive them of oxygen, and the cells would turn cancerous. So this is what I'm saying here is that the extracellular and intracellular oxidative stress perpetuates the non-healing wound, resulting in anaerobic cellular regression. Anaerobic cellular regression, low oxygen utilization. We were going to have a speaker. He was going to come and do a poster presentation, and he didn't make it, but there's one of us I can't think of his name right now, but he is using hyperbaric oxygen with his IV vitamin C and getting good results. So the whole oxygen therapy thing, I think, is open. I know down in Mexico they're giving a kind of fluid that improves oxygen utilization in the blood. And so oxygen therapy to me is a really leading edge in this whole thrust to try to understand what's really causing the cancer. So this is the part that many of you, I think maybe you know about this, but patients are always kind of mystified when I say that vitamin C, and I'm going to tell Tom so that Tom just sit easy, vitamin C will always be an antioxidant, but yet it creates a pro-oxidant effect. So how does it do that? Vitamin C creates this pro-oxidant effect. Well, it's an antioxidant, gives up its electrons and becomes dehydroascorbate. In the presence of iron, the iron is reduced as the vitamin C reduces it, and it becomes dehydroascorbate. The reduced iron can then interact with oxygen and form hydrogen peroxide in the presence of iron and oxygen. And that was proven and well documented in Dr. Mark Levine's wonderful publication on vitamin C in pharmacological concentration selectively generates ascorbic radical and hydrogen peroxide in the extracellular fluid in vivo. So he was able to do this incredible experiment where they did some kind of dialysis on mice, giving them intraperitoneal vitamin C injections and actually documenting hydrogen peroxide in the extracellular tissues. And then we have the Fenton reaction, which takes that peroxide and can then, in the presence of reduced iron, generate the hydroxyl radical. So if you put this all together, this is redox cycling with IV vitamin C. As long as you're putting the vitamin C in an adequate amount dose, an orthomolecular dose, you will get redox cycling and the generation of the hydroxyl radical. Here's our pro-oxidant. Here's what we need to convert the NAD to NADH. So it's kind of like a water wheel, and that's why the frequency with which we give patients IV vitamin C, I think, needs to be further clarified, because maybe we're not giving it enough. Maybe we should be putting pumps on people and giving them vitamin C as a pump. Maybe we need to be figuring out how much oral vitamin C they need to take in addition to the IV vitamin C, how often they should take it in order to maintain adequate levels. These are all questions that I think are relevant to this discussion of IV vitamin C in cancer. So I'm going to tell you, and this is why my title of my talk is the Bi-oxidant Paradox, that the ideal redox therapy for cancer is a bi-oxidant therapy. So conventional cancer treatments kill cancer cells by increasing oxidation and inducing apoptosis, but if you have apoptosis control mechanisms that are damaged by excessive oxidation, such as the p53 gene, that allows therapy-resistant cells to emerge and multiply. That's why chemotherapy and radiation, if you do it too much, you're creating too much oxidative stress and you're knocking out the apoptosis mechanism. And these cells, once they lose that, now they've got perpetual replication. So an ideal redox therapy would be bi-oxidant. It's an antioxidant that repairs the apoptosis controls, but it's a pro-oxidant that first of all, it signals the DNA so that apoptosis will occur, but it also oxidizes the NADH to NAD, thus helping to restore aerobic functioning within the cells. So when the DNA damage secondary to escalating oxidative stress, you get failure of the cellular and gene repair, and this p53 initiated apoptosis mechanism no longer can trigger cell death. So a lot of the natural therapies seem to help to restore apoptosis, and I think that's one of the big things that IV vitamin C does, is it restores apoptosis mechanisms so that damaged cells can take themselves out. This is a very key slide that's in, again, Dr. Hickey's book on cancer, nutrition, and survival. If you have increasing levels of oxidative stress, that alone will cause cells to begin to divide more rapidly. And there's a certain point at which that rapid cell division will lead to apoptosis and necrosis of cells if the apoptotic mechanisms are still intact. But if there's DNA damage from excessive oxidation, you lose those controls. So persistent oxidative stress causes sustained mitochondrial injury and damage with increased oxidation, hypoxemia, glycolysis, and acidosis. These are all things that we deal with all the time in cancer, advanced cancer patients. That is supposed to turn the cell signaling on. The cell's supposed to change its behavior. It's supposed to apoptose unless the p50 gene is damaged and the DNA RNA function is so bad that it can no longer activate those mechanisms. So what Cameron and Pauling actually showed is that it doesn't take that much vitamin C. This is what's kind of intriguing about the discussion of how much vitamin C does it take to help a cancer patient, because they took stage 3 and 4 patients and gave them just 10 grams of vitamin C IV for just 10 days. They gave it every day for 10 days, and then they sent them home on 10 grams of oral vitamin C. And they had a full 4-fold increase in life expectancy. And they thought if they gave more, in their papers, they said if they would have given more, maybe they would have had even a better effect. Abram Hoffer did not have IV vitamin C. He gave people a little cocktail of nutrients, including a fairly big dose of oral vitamin C, but he had marked survival in his patients that were willing to take the vitamin cocktail. So there are other mechanisms afoot here, so more is not always better. And so that's, I think, a key question why we're having the panel tomorrow morning as to what is the right dose for vitamin C? What is the right dose? So Mortel, of course, he, from Mayo, he's the one he just gave the patients 10 grams of oral vitamin C, and they didn't get better. And he did not give it IV, and there was all kinds of, accusations and, letters and reports, and Pauling spent a great deal of energy trying to tell Mortel he had not replicated their study, but that fell on deaf ears, and so a lot of the oncologic community said this is the final word. Vitamin C doesn't work. It is not the final word. Part of the problem is that we call ascorbic acid a vitamin, and by definition, a vitamin is something that works in small amounts, in trace amounts. And so when you talk to people about using vitamin C, patients kind of like it because they feel safe with it, but doctors kind of say, hey, there's no way that can work. We've got cancer here, folks. You need something really strong to get it to work. And so this is where the understanding that vitamin C in the animal kingdom occurs in all levels. And if you look at various animal models, here we are giving 1 milligram per kilogram per day for the RDA, the ridiculous daily allowance. Whereas dogs will generate 3 milligrams per kilogram per day, pigs will generate 8 milligrams per kilogram per day. Monkeys, a spider monkey in a natural habitat will consume the equivalent of 100 milligrams per kilogram per day. A healthy goat will synthesize 190 milligrams per kilogram per day. That's about 14 grams a day. That's how much I take. I don't know how much you guys take. But I've found out that I feel a lot better if I'm on more of a Linus Pauling dose. My adrenals survive better in the work environment that I'm in. But a sick goat, it's pretty amazing, can really ramp up their production 1,300 milligrams per kilogram per day, which would be the equivalent of 100 milligram per day synthesis. So that's equivalent to what a lot of us are using for our cancer patients. We're ramping up the IVCs from 15, 25, 50, 75, 100, and we're going to have a presentation by Dr. Rear on 150 grams for lymphoma. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow morning. But if you get a chance, go to vitamincfoundation.org or .com. Erwin Stone's book, The Healing Factor, is there, and it's really a fascinating book on using vitamin C. And I always try to tell patients, this is something your body would make if it could. If it hadn't mutated the gene, it would make vitamin C. And that it does all kinds of wonderful things, and he gives amazing amounts of evidence. Even back in 1976, vitamin C is probably the most researched of all molecules in the scientific arena, and the most underutilized. So Dr. Riordan started RECNAC, and he was able to show that you needed to give the vitamin C IV to demonstrate selective cytotoxicity. And it was around 350 to 400 milligrams per deciliter that he showed that in vitro cell lines would be rendered non-survival, apoptotic with that high of a dose. And this was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. I won't go into this, but just basically it says that there's a big difference between IV and oral vitamin C. The pharmacokinetics are really a lot different, and you need to be thinking IV if you're going to get an adequate dose in order to get that selective cytotoxicity. And so he started RECNAC, which is cancer spelled backwards, to comprehensive biological research intent on discovering the underlying causes of cancer, to find non-toxic adjunctive treatment modalities for cancer patients. I think we can, one of our speakers tomorrow, Dr. Feason, is a local oncologist who's interested in using vitamin C, and one of the case studies today will be an oncologist that's using IV vitamin C. I think if they understand that this is an adjunctive therapy, maybe it's a standalone, but it certainly can function very well as an adjunctive therapy, and you don't have to get into a big head-butting battle with the oncologist. If they realize that they could have much happier cancer patients with fewer side effects and better outcomes if they used vitamin C. Dr. Sullivan is going to be reporting on the famous ovarian cancer study that Dr. Driscoll did years ago, where they gave the vitamin C as part of the hydration IV for their ovarian cancer patients. And so I'm very interested to hear about that. So we did 15 years of vitamin C research here. A lot of this is published on our website at riordanclinic.org. It's all published there. You can take a look at it. We're very happy to have Michael and Jorge here. They've done a lot of great work and published many papers, RECNAC 2. Dr. Riordan's first patient was George Williams. He was back in 1990. He was diagnosed with adenocarcinoma of the right kidney, underwent nephrectomy. After surgery, they found lung and liver mets. Dr. Riordan put him on 30 grams twice a week. And after 15 months of therapy, his metastases were all gone. 15 months of therapy. He didn't just quit after a month or two. He kind of kept him on it, so it took a little while. But 14 years later, George died of congestive heart failure. And I'm really convinced that my father did not die of cancer. He died of really complications of diabetes and congestive heart failure. So the DNA, if it's damaged or mutated, it loses the ability to repair itself, which increases the likelihood of cancerous cells redifferentiating back to healthy cells. This is just what I showed you earlier. And this is what Dr. Steve Hickey talks about as the microevolutionary hypothesis, that in many ways, the way cancer therapy is done these days is a kind of survival of the fittest. And it turns out that these are the cells that are best adapted to live in a microinflammatory environment. And so my next phase here of the present, we're going to take a break here in about 2 minutes. My next part of the talk is to talk about that microinflammatory environment, that it really is, it's survival of the fittest. So what's happened is the complex signaling and control mechanisms have been damaged, and so what we are doing is we are selecting for cells that can survive in that environment. That's why I showed you the aneuploidy idea. Are we just basically creating cells that can survive in an abnormal environment, and the healthy cells have died off? So Hickey calls cancer the selfish cell. Showed you this already. So this diagram, the way this improves is that if you have the pro-oxidant effect of vitamin C, you get improved oxidation of NADH to NAD. And that improves your ATP production. You have improved production of antioxidants intracellularly. That decreases the mitochondrial injury. The mitochondria start to function better. And so then the apoptotic mechanisms start to work again. Do you know how p53 gene works? It sends a signal to the mitochondria to just explode. And then the rapid release of the reactive oxygen species is what kills the cell from the inside. So it's a kind of a hara-kiri via mitochondria. But if you have poorly functioning mitochondria, if they're in an anaerobic state, they're not producing reactive oxygen species. The furnace is pretty much cooled down. So even if they do explode, they don't end up killing the cell. Okay, so this is just talking about the pro-oxidant properties of vitamin C. We thought maybe initially that the hydrogen peroxide was actually acting as some kind of a natural chemotherapy, and that the tumor cells, which were low in catalase, were the ones that were more susceptible to the effects of the hydrogen peroxide. That may be true. I know I was hoping Frank would come because he says he's got evidence that not all tumor cells are low in catalase, and we were going to talk about that. So the ideal redox therapy is bi-oxidant. The antioxidant repairs the DNA apoptosis controls, and it induces intracellular antioxidant enzyme formation. It's also a pro-oxidant. It's a metabolic therapy that signals DNA initiation of apoptosis in damaged cancer cells, and it restores aerobic functioning in the mitochondria. And it's biological. It relieves the scurvy common in cancer patients. It reduces their pain, improves their appetite, and it replicates nature's original remedy for injury and infection. You know, before doctors and hospitals, what could animals do if they were sick or infected or injured? They had to rest and start making more vitamin C. So this is the story about the cytokines. If the nutrient reserves are inadequate or depleted, then the damage cannot be repaired, and so the cytokine signaling gets stronger. And this was Dr. Xiaolong Ming showed by using these cytokine arrays that if you give a patient an IVC, even one 75-gram IVC will dramatically shift cytokine activity back towards the more normal level. He showed that 22 cytokine categories were improved after a series of IV vitamin Cs. What I want to do now, we've got about 25 minutes here, and I just want to kind of show you some of the research that supports the notion that there is a microinflammatory environment being created in which the tumor cells grow, and that by reducing inflammation, we can actually reduce the propensity of the cancer to proceed in its direction of de-differentiation. So these 7 hallmarks of cancer that are generally being recognized as the signs of cancerous cells: self-sufficiency of growth signals and insensitivity to anti-growth signals. That's the inflammatory cytokine imbalance. The evasion of apoptosis and the unlimited proliferation potential. That's the destruction of the p53 control of apoptosis or otherwise DNA damage or mutation. And then the enhanced angiogenesis and tissue invasion and metastasis. That's the anaerobic cellular regression, where you have the cells losing their internal controls and becoming more like selfish cells. But all of these add up together to form this inflammatory microenvironment. So this is why I'm saying that it would be wise for us to put more of our attention on the environment in which the cancer cells are thriving. And I think this is why the research in anti-cancer lifestyles, such as diet, exercise, stress management, all the various things that we try to teach people to take better care of themselves, as well as IV vitamin C and other nutrients, they are modulating this inflammatory microenvironment. So this 7th hallmark of cancer, to me, is very fertile ground, very wonderful area to work on, and it's also a nice metaphor that you can explain to patients what you're doing. Some people want to know, is IV vitamin C like a natural chemotherapeutic agent? So that's trying to define it in terms of a drug. And I think a more effective way of defining it is that, no, it's a nutrient that enhances the health of the cells that surround the tumor cells. And by virtue of better environmental factors, the cancer cells are less likely to progress and more likely to regress or to heal. So we now take the notion of a non-healing wound to that of a wound that can heal if you bandage it, if you take good care of your wound, if you have good nutrition. Most people intuitively know that wounds don't heal as well if you're malnourished. They understand that you have to treat the wound and take care of it in order to promote a healing process. So I really think it may be a way to help out in terms of getting the message across to people. So inflammation and cancer, this is from Nature, 2002. They actually said inflammation is a critical component of tumor progression. Cancers arise from sites of chronic injury. The tumor microenvironment is largely orchestrated by inflammatory cells and the cytokines. I'm going to talk a little bit about NF-kappa B in just a minute. An indispensable participant in the neoplastic process, fosters cell proliferation, survival, and migration. So the tumor cells this is an interesting statement. The tumor cells co-opt the cytokine signaling molecules of the innate immune system. So it's almost like the tumor cells have taken over what's going on in the attempt to heal the wound, in order to perpetuate it. So again, cancer as the non-healing wound, all these sustained injuries. This is a very complex slide. I'm not going to go into it, but at the American Association for Cancer Research, microbial infection, chemical irritation, tissue wounding. They use the term tissue wounding sets up inflammation. And if it's an acute inflammation and it resolves, you're home free. But if it becomes chronic inflammation and it gets into these loops where the system more or less gets stuck, then you start signaling all these various factors, growth factors, angiogenesis factors, things that are in an attempt to promote to heal the wound. But the problem is the environment itself becomes a propagation of the actual cancer cell and tumor initiation. And then you can see over here, reactive oxygen species, DNA damage and mutation, tumor initiation. And once the tumor has been initiated, it thrives in this microenvironment. So our goal here is using IVC and other natural therapies as a way of changing the environment. So these insights are fostering new anti-inflammatory therapeutic approaches to cancer development from nature again. This was highlighted in an article that came out of our research department. Dr. Tom Eicham is one of our board members and a researcher here. And actually, Dr. Michael Gonzalez and Dr. Jorge Miranda are going to report on this topic, intravenous ascorbic acid to prevent and treat cancer-associated sepsis. So patients who have cancer, and Dr. Riordan verified this years ago, tend to be deficient in vitamin C. You almost can't walk into the door of the Riordan Clinic without someone grabbing your arm and taking a vitamin C sample. And so he found that all of the cancer patients typically were low, either in a scurvy range or either that or a low normal range. And when you have low ascorbic acid, there are studies that show that by increasing that ascorbic acid, you can modify cancer-associated inflammation. You can prevent the progression of the systemic inflammatory response syndrome, SIRS. You can prevent multi-organ failure, and you can prevent the progression to terminal sepsis, because that's really how cancer patients finally do die. But it's a slow process. And so IV vitamin C can improve quality of life. We have two studies. Dr. Yanagasawa's group has published a study, and a Korean group have published a study on how vitamin C clearly modifies and improves quality of life. So cancer patients are dying of scurvy. We know that vitamin C maintains the endothelial integrity, it suppresses inflammatory markers, protects against sepsis, and it has direct anti-neoplastic effects. So it's very reasonable, and this is where we can talk to the allopathic peers and show to them that vitamin C is an excellent adjuvant in terms of preventing the progression of any type of cancer when used in the appropriate way. This was from the journal Cytokine, showing that vitamin C does reduce cytokine productions in vitro. The IL-6, the tumor necrosis factor, and the IL-2s, you can see how they were reduced as the concentration of vitamin C went up. This was a study that Dr. Nina gave me showing that vitamin C inhibits NF-kappa B activation by tumor necrosis factor via the activation of P38 mitogen activated protein kinase, basically saying that this transcription factor where the nucleus sends out a signal to tell the cells to start increasing the inflammatory response, that can be inhibited by vitamin C. There's some other nutrients like vitamin D that are great inhibitors of NF-kappa B as well. So this is what we showed you earlier, that cellular injury triggers cytokine signaling, and if you're not able to provide what the cell needs to heal, you'll get an intensification of the inflammatory response. The heal the wound signal gets stronger, and the signals to turn off healing gets weaker. Showed you this already. This is what I want to talk about now, is CRP. A lot of people wonder what would be a good tumor marker for this inflammatory microenvironment in cancer cells. And we've been looking at the CRP because it's a readily available test. Patients are beginning to understand what it means. You can order it easily enough. And here's a study where they looked at 274,000 patients. And 1 out of 3 of the deaths that were recorded during this time frame were due to cancer. Patients with an increased CRP had a higher risk of dying from cancer than from other causes independent of acute infection. So really, CRP is a pretty good tumor marker. If you want just a general tumor marker, because that's what patients keep asking me. How am I doing? I'm doing my vitamin C's. I'm taking care of myself. Are we making any progress? And a lot of times all you can say is, well, you'll have to wait till your next visit to the oncologist and the next scan. But I think CRP is a reasonably good way, even though, as I'll show you in just a minute, it can fluctuate while you're doing the IVCs. But over time, it can be a good way of showing that IV vitamin C does help. So this is looking at C-reactive protein and the causes of death, and it basically means that the higher your CRP is, the more likely you are to die of something. So CRP is, in general, a pretty good risk marker for the risk of dying. It also predicts cancer survival. This is from Current Oncology Report. It predicts cancer survival in myeloma, melanoma, lymphoma, ovarian, renal, pancreatic, and GI cancers. So, in order to investigate this, and at the panel this afternoon, we will have, at the end of the day, a panel of all the speakers. I will be gone, but I'm going to have Dr. Nina Mikarova. Is Dr. Nina here? There she is. Could you stand up just for a second? Dr. Mikarova is responsible for publishing 22 studies out of the Riordan Clinic Research Institute. So she's really been an amazing scientist, and we're very grateful to have her. A lot of the work that you'll see here in the next few slides is the work of Dr. Nina Mikarova. So just for example, this is an interesting slide looking at CRP before and after IVC. And the dots show the before in relationship to the after a series of IV vitamin C. And for example, the red line here, this particular dot corresponds to this patient having a CRP of 121. After they received their series of IV vitamin C, their CRP had gone down to 13. So 76%, let me see, I probably jumped over this a little bit too fast. This was 28 of 45 subjects. 62% of the subjects that we studied had sharply elevated CRPs greater than 10 milligrams per liter at the start of IVC therapy. Of these, 86% showed a reduction in CRP during IVC therapy. Of the 28 subjects that had elevated CRP prior to therapy, only 14 had elevated CRP levels after treatment. So there was a 50% normalization, 50% normalized. They actually normalized their CRPs. Of these 28 subjects who started with elevated CRPs, the median CRP reduction was 80%, with an IRQ of 39% to 94%. So this is kind of showing you someone getting, they're starting out with a C-reactive protein of, let's say that's about 17. And then after their vitamin C infusions, you can see at one point the CRP went up, but then at a certain point in their therapy, there was a dramatic reduction in the CRP. This kind of shows you how it can be a bit erratic. And it reminds me of when Dr. Riordan patients would say, well, how am I going to get better, Dr. Riordan? And he would say, okay, here's where you are, and here's where we want you to be. This is better. And it's not going to be this, it's going to be this. You're going to have ups and downs, but your general trend is going to be towards better. Well, in this case, this person's CRP certainly had some major ups and downs, but as you can see, the general trend was better. The effects of IVC on tumor markers PSA, and there are a number of doctors that are beginning to think of the PSA as an inflammation marker in the prostate. And we can show that the majority of the PSAs did improve with IVC therapy. They may not have normalized, but they did improve. 15 of 20 subjects showed reduced PSA levels during IVC. So we had 20 patients for whom PSAs were assessed before and after their therapy. 75% with a 95% confidence interval showed reduced PSA levels during IVC treatment. And this is an example of how, again, it can be a rather turbulent course where it gets worse before it gets better. And that is typical of natural healing. Very often in any kind of a natural healing approach, I'll tell patients you're going to have a healing crisis where things may get worse before they get better, and that can certainly be true with IV vitamin C. Same thing here. That's why sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. And so if you can kind of keep people interested and not too involved with the numbers, numbers can be deceiving. So I kind of say, hey, focus on how you're feeling, how you're doing. Are you eating better? Are you taking better care of yourself? Are you sleeping better? Is your pain level down? By focusing on things like that, very often people will stay interested in continuing their IVCs for long enough for them to do some good. There was not a significant effect on tumor markers. We did measure CEA, CA2729, CA15-3. Of course, there are a lot of oncologists that are not too wild about tumor markers either as far as their predictive value. Sometimes they seem to help out and sometimes they don't. But overall, this is a summary slide showing prostate cancer, 79% improvement in CRP, breast cancer, 80% improved CRP. All patients, 76% of 45 showed improvements in their CRP. So to me, this is pretty good evidence that IV vitamin C, at least in this study, is showing modulation of the micro-inflammatory environment. So once again, doctor, what does IVC do? Well, it helps you reduce inflammation, and cancer cells like inflammation. So if we can reduce inflammation, then the cancer cells won't do as well. And if you take good care of yourself, you can reduce your inflammation, and that will help you sustain a longer remission, hopefully, or maybe even getting over the cancer. At least improving quality of life. So the tumor marker improvements, there were some tumor marker improvements with the PSA, 75%. Breast cancer, there was some improvement, but not statistically significant. The fractions of the patients seeing reduced inflammation as measured by CRP was significantly above 50% in the prostate cancer group, the breast cancer group, and the entire study group. IVC seemed to have a beneficial effect also in reducing PSA levels, but breast cancer markers showed no significant improvement. So this is looking at a change in CRP as it relates to PSA and CA2729. A little bit of statistical, it was significant for prostate cancer, but not for the breast cancer. In subjects in whom both tumor marker and CRP data was available, we found a correlation. Subjects who had reduced CRP tended to have reduced tumor marker values. So if you could get a significant reduction in CRP, you might see an improvement in their tumor markers. So this is kind of an illustration of that correlation between CRP and PSA using the IV vitamin C. Again, kind of showing a correlation between CRP and PSA. So it can be hypothesized that inflammation in the prostate may be leading to prostate enlargement, and CRP may be a reflection of that prostatic inflammation, and so therefore PSA may be a reflection of prostatic inflammation as well. This was kind of a specialized thing that we did. We looked at the effect of six 50-gram IV vitamin Cs. And we looked at endpoints after, and we started out with the Riordan protocol where we gave them a lower dose, 10 grams, 25 grams, then 50, 50, 50, and looked at the effect of some cytokines. What did that do to the inflammatory cytokines? And in general, we did see reductions in inflammatory cytokines as a result of doing the 6 IV vitamin C. So that more or less correlates what I mentioned to you earlier about Dr. Xiaolong Ming showing lowered cytokine levels as a result of IV vitamin C. So the conclusions from this study, the analysis shows that the effect of high-dose IV vitamin C does reduce inflammation in cancer patients, 75% CRP reduction, but that did progress in 25%, so it's not 100% across the board. So it's a provisional marker for how people are doing. So it can't be looked at as 100%. So 22% of the patients had improvements in their PSA of the prostate cancer patients, but 7 patients had progression of the PSA with the PSA using IV vitamin C. So in general, IVC treatment may reduce inflammation in cancer patients, and the reduction in inflammation is correlated with reductions in the tumor marker PSA. That's the 2 things we get out of this study. So the way I kind of visualize what's going on here is, health, and then you have the sustained injury, and you have a signal, an oxidative signal, and then there's an effort on the part of the body to repair using inflammation. But then something gets stuck. The inflammatory microenvironment seems to prevent the progression to the complete healing response. So I think that's where we should be working, is in the inflammatory microenvironment. This is back to Dr. Hickey's hypothesis that damaged cells divide rapidly, errors result, natural selection pressures favor more of the primitive cells that are striving to survive. So the single cells are used to being on their own, kind of the renegade type cells, maybe the aneuploidic type cells. But multicellular organisms have complex signaling and control mechanisms that are subject to damage, and it's the damaged cells that are more likely to revert back to these single cell survival tactics rather than competition and cooperation. Conventional cancer treatments kill cancer cells by increasing oxidation and hopefully inducing apoptosis. But if you overdo it, if you overkill, so to speak, you damage the apoptosis control mechanisms such as the p53 gene. That allows for therapy-resistant cells to emerge. The environment now is very inflammatory, and so these cells will continue to be stimulated to divide and propagate. So an ideal redox therapy would both be an antioxidant that repairs apoptosis control and a pro-oxidant that initiates the signal of the apoptosis of the damaged cancer cells. So I'm not going to go into these, but these are 3 big theories of cancer genesis. Dr. Roger Williams basically saying if you lack key nutrients, you lose your control, and that tends to happen in damaged cells. Dr. Hickey's microinflammatory hypothesis, and then the Ming-Riordan functional repair tissue. This afternoon, Dr. Neil Riordan will spend a little bit of time explaining the idea of the malignant transformation of the wound occurs in an attempt to secrete functional repair molecules, which are your cytokines and growth factors. But it gets overwhelmed and you run out of gas, basically. This is just a little thing that we do to explain part of the Riordan protocol. People ask us, why do you do post-IVC saturation levels when your patients come in? Part of it came from the fact that we did a little study looking at a 15-gram vitamin C in healthy patients compared to cancer patients. And what we saw is that cancer patients have a below normal vitamin C level to begin with, and the vitamin C that they have tends to accumulate in tumors and other tissues, and some of it is being used up by the oxidative stress. And so we found that we can more or less document and measure the amount of oxidative stress they're dealing with by seeing how far below they are from their predicted level of vitamin C following an IVC infusion. So for example, we had 12 of the healthy controls following their vitamin C infusion. They had a blood level of about 150 milligrams per deciliter, whereas the 3 cancer patients that we gave that same dose to, their post-C level was only about 65. Well, someone said, well, doesn't that depend upon the severity of the cancer? So Dr. Hyland and I, when he was here, we picked out some charts, just kind of randomly, of our cancer patients. 18 patients were picked out randomly, and then Dr. Hyland grouped them by stage, and we just used 3 stages: local, no spread beyond organ boundaries; regional, spread is limited to the region of the tumor; and distant, where the spread has metastasized to distant sites. And so when we looked at the data and looked at their post 15-gram IVC levels, there was a nice little correlation. The healthy people from the prior study had the levels of around 150, but the 3 of the people had local cancer, 7 had regional spread, and we had 8 that already had distant spread. So the post IVC after a 15-gram was shows a nice correlation with the level of cancer that patient is dealing with. So if you have a stage 3 or 4 cancer patient, they're going to have a lot more oxidative stress, and so the vitamin C will be kind of absorbed or sponged in by the free radicals that it has to neutralize. So the next insight is that the non-healing wound site undergoes malignant transformation. So mitochondrial function shifts anaerobic, metabolic toxins begin to accumulate, the lactic acidosis, and there is malignant transformation of the entire cellular site into the non-healing wound of cancer. It's like a battleground, and it's just filled with inflammatory debris. So if we say what really causes cancer, if we ask that question, now this is almost like a summary. It appears to be a maladaptive cellular response to sustained injury. The persistence of injury depletes repair molecules and results in chronic oxidative stress overload, which damages DNA and it causes an outpouring of cytokines. This leads to a change in cellular behavior. The damaged cells respond to the oxidative signal with an attempt to have mitochondria-coordinated apoptosis. But if you get excessive damage, you get loss of the p53 control of the apoptosis, and uncontrolled cellular proliferation results. So injured multicellular tissues undergo malignant transformation and regress back to the selfish single-cell survival behaviors. So this is our original where we started. This is the healthy health and healing. By the way, I always like to tell people in my hand, there's the IVC right in the palm of your hand. So a rational treatment of cancer rebalances redox, removes disruptions, treats with antioxidants and prooxidants, controls inflammation, and restores the aerobic function of the cells. So what about the Riordan IVC protocol? Really, there's a number of IVC protocols that people are using, but the Riordan IVC protocol rebalances the redox inversion. It detoxifies and removes disruptions. It treats with a bi-oxidant regimen, selective cytotoxicity, and then the restoring of aerobic functioning in the mitochondria. It controls inflammatory cytokines. It shifts the cytokine activity back towards normal. And it promotes cellular energy restoration. It helps to restore aerobic mitochondrial function. So in summary, cancerous cells have regressed from multicellular cooperation back to single-cell survival, paradoxically causing the more rapid demise of the host organism. So I'm not going to go over this again. Been over that. So I kind of came upon this old quote that many of you have heard of, where Pasteur, on his deathbed, was speaking to Professor Renan. And he said to him, "Bernard was right. The microbe is nothing and the soil is everything." So are we spending too much attention on the cancer cell and not enough on the microenvironment? Much in the same way we give a lot of attention to germs, but the milieu, the terrain in which the germs grow, may be as important, if not more important. And so when we talk about oxidants and antioxidants and oxidative stress and reduced cytosol, acid-alkaline chemo versus high-dose vitamin C, nourished versus malnourished, it's all a particle and wave discussion, which means that we need to be thinking of both. You can't ignore the cancer cell. But on the other hand, we need to give adequate attention to the fact that by controlling the environment, we can make a difference in promoting the health and well-being and hopefully creating that spontaneous remission in cancer patients. Final summary slide. IV vitamin C boosts immunity, So that helps prevent secondary infections. It'll be very interesting when you hear Dr. Marco's presentation on the use of the special food to boost the immunity, because we know that people with better immunity have better outcomes. It stimulates collagen formation. This was actually Dr. Pauling's and Dr. Cameron's original idea of what vitamin C does, is that it somehow walls off the tumor so it's less likely to grow. And it still may be doing that, since you need vitamin C for collagen formation. It inhibits hyaluronidase, which is necessary for metastasis. It relieves cellular hypoxemia and restores aerobic metabolism, restores the mitochondrial functioning, which can help your apoptosis mechanisms work better. It inhibits angiogenesis, which I didn't take as much time to go through, but we have some very great studies on how vitamin C does inhibit angiogenesis. Corrects scurvy, less fatigue, patients feel better, less pain. It activates the immune system. Vitamin C is a tremendous detoxifier. It enhances the reformation and recirculation of glutathione. It relieves pain and promotes well-being. People feel better. And for those of you that are doing IV vitamin C, that's the first inkling of real hope when patients have a couple of their IV vitamin Cs and they say, hey, doctor, I'm actually starting to feel better. That's something real to them that they hadn't gotten before from any of their other therapies. It potentiates chemotherapy and radiation, reduces side effects and toxicity of conventional therapy. It should be considered a plausible oncologic adjunct in the care of cancer patients. And I've got down here questions, but we really don't have time now. I'm going to have to defer because we want to finish. We want to give Dr. Sullivan a chance to do his presentation. And so I'll try to, if you have questions, be sure and either write them down and give them to the panel. They should be able to do that, or you can email me at rhunninghake@riordanclinic.org. I think I'm going to just have to stop, and I want to thank you for your attention, and thank you for all of you that came up to me and wished us well in our in making this shift from having a living father to having a spiritual father. And so I still believe he's with me, and I think he was with me today. But I hope that this presentation is kind of giving you giving us a good start in thinking about how IV vitamin C can be a very powerful tool in helping our patients who come to us with cancer. So thank you very much.